1. The Maya of Tikal. Let's talk about an ancient metropolis that was swallowed whole by the very environment it tried to master. Hidden deep beneath the dense, suffocating rainforest canopy of modern-day Guatemala, Tikal was once the beating heart of a thriving, complex civilization. But a catastrophic, prolonged drought acted as the silent, unyielding killer that brought this mighty society to its knees. Over centuries, shifting weather patterns and massive, unchecked deforestation by the inhabitants themselves disrupted the natural rainfall. This created an environmental disaster of epic proportions, wiping out their agriculture and leaving thousands to face starvation. If you want to picture the sheer scale of this place, imagine walking through a modern international airport, sprawling, and unending. That is exactly how large Tikal was at its peak. It was a massive network of bright, white limestone plazas, causeways, and towering pyramids that reached above the treetops. Today, the stone structures stand starkly against the deep green vines and creeping moss that now cover them, their steep, weathered gray steps heavily textured by centuries of erosion. The real power is their incredible, ancient water management system. They engineered massive, citywide reservoirs and paved catchments designed to capture every single drop of rain during the wet season. The endurance and sheer acceleration of their urban growth in such a harsh, unforgiving jungle environment was nothing short of scientific genius. For a modern human, a severe lack of rain might just mean a brown lawn, a local water restriction, or feeling a little thirsty on a long summer hike. But for the Maya of Tikal, the lack of water meant absolute, inescapable devastation. When the rains finally stopped coming, the crops failed rapidly, and the life-saving reservoirs turned into stagnant, shallow mud pits. Here is exactly how a megadrought inflicts damage on a megacity. The disaster doesn't attack all at once. It attacks the foundation of life slowly. The blazing sun bakes the soil into hard, cracked clay, making it completely impossible to grow maize. Famine stalks the population, waiting silently for the weakest citizens to fall first. Without water, the intricate social web completely unravels. The environment doesn't physically chase you down. It simply waits you out, applying relentless, daily pressure until survival becomes mathematically impossible. Nature then physically reclaims its territory, forcefully wrapping thick tree roots around carved stone blocks to crush the temples slowly into dust. And here is the most bizarre, unexpected fact about Tikal's ultimate end. In their desperate attempts to appease their gods, they painted their sprawling temples in a vibrant, sacred red pigment. This pigment was made from a mineral called cinnabar, which contains heavy, lethal amounts of mercury. Over time, when occasional heavy rains did strike, the water washed the toxic mercury straight from their painted pyramids directly into their drinking reservoirs. They accidentally poisoned their own emergency water supply while actively trying to save themselves from the drought. The next one is even bigger, and its sudden disappearance is tied to a sprawling engineering marvel that went terribly wrong. 2. Angkor Wat's Khmer Empire. Let's talk about the largest pre-industrial city in the world, a place completely consumed by the very element that made it powerful. Located in the lush, tropical lowlands of modern-day Cambodia, this empire fell victim to a catastrophic climate shift. The medieval warm period ended, bringing extreme, unpredictable monsoon cycles. Decades of severe, scorching drought were suddenly followed by years of absolute, torrential flooding. This violent swing in weather physically ripped apart their complex infrastructure, wiping out the society's ability to feed its massive population. To understand the size of this lost empire, you have to picture the entire modern city of Los Angeles, California. The Khmer Empire's capital was a staggering, sprawling grid of elevated dirt mounds, perfectly straight moats, and intricate stone temples. The appearance is hauntingly beautiful, massive towers shaped like lotus buds, carved entirely out of dark, porous sandstone. The heavy, humid air hangs over the dark green, algae-covered reflecting pools that surround the ancient walls. Surprisingly, the power is their unrivaled hydraulic engineering. They possessed an unbelievable ability to manipulate the flow of massive rivers, directing millions of gallons of water into artificial lakes the size of small seas. Their speed and precision in moving water allowed them to harvest rice 3 times a year, an absolute superpower in the ancient world. If you experience infrastructure failure today, it's usually mild, like a clogged rain gutter spilling over your porch, or a brief power outage during a storm. But when the Khmer Empire's infrastructure failed, it unleashed a watery hell on earth. The uncontrolled floods ripped away the earthen foundations of entire city blocks, drowning homes and suffocating the rice fields under feet of mud. This is how extreme monsoon flooding inflicts terminal damage. The floodwaters ambush the city, violently tearing through the meticulously carved sandstone spillways. The massive volume of water violently attacks the earthen dams, causing them to burst and send a wall of destruction rushing through the low-lying neighborhoods. The floods scour the earth, washing away the nutrient-rich topsoil so that when the water finally recedes, nothing will grow. Humans endure immediate displacement, but it is the slow, agonizing starvation that follows the flood that truly ruins the civilization. Here is the bizarre behavior of the jungle that completely turns everything upside down today. The giant, sprawling silk cotton and strangler fig trees that seem to be crushing the ruins are actually the only things holding them together. When archaeologists tried to remove the massive, tentacle-like tree roots to save the temples, the ancient stone blocks immediately collapsed. The jungle didn't just conquer the city, it physically became the structural skeleton of the empire. The next location is much older, and its mysterious end was dictated by violent shifts deep beneath the Earth's crust. 3. The Olmec of San Lorenzo. Let's talk about the mother culture of Mesoamerica, an empire that simply vanished into the swampy mud of history. Situated along the hot, humid Gulf Coast of modern-day Mexico, San Lorenzo was a thriving epicenter of trade and religion. But this empire was wiped out by a terrifying combination of tectonic shifts and catastrophic river changes. Deep earthquakes and shifting fault lines physically altered the landscape, causing the mighty rivers they relied on for trade and farming to completely change their course, leaving the city stranded and starving. When you look at the monuments they left behind, you need to imagine a modern minivan. That is exactly the size and weight of a single Olmec colossal stone head. The city itself was a massive, man-made plateau rising 50 feet out of the surrounding floodplains. Visually, it was a striking contrast of deep, dark brown earthen mounds rising sharply against a sea of vibrant, bright green tropical wetlands. The real power is their superhuman ability to move impossible weights without the invention of the wheel. They transported massive basalt boulders weighing up to 40 tons across miles of dense, treacherous swamps and rushing rivers. Their endurance and mechanical ingenuity using only ropes, logs, and sheer human muscle is absolutely mind-blowing. For us, a river changing course or a minor tectonic shift might just mean a dusty sneeze of dirt falling from the ceiling or a new sandbar forming at the local beach. But for the Olmec, it was an apocalyptic death sentence. When the ground violently shifted, it blocked their rivers, instantly severing their only highway for trade, food, and communication. Here is how tectonic and environmental shifts attack a civilization. The earthquakes strike without warning, cracking the earthen platforms and collapsing wooden homes. But the real damage is how the shifting earth ambushes the water supply. The land physically tilts, causing vital rivers to drain away into useless swamps. The newly formed swamps breed millions of mosquitoes, attacking the populace with illness. The civilization is starved of resources, and the residents are forced to slowly abandon their magnificent monuments to the creeping, relentless mud. Nature simply waits for them to leave. The final fact about their abandonment completely turns everything upside down. As the society collapsed and the rivers dried, the Olmec didn't just pack up and leave. They spent unimaginable time and energy deliberately destroying, defacing, and then formally burying their massive, minivan-sized stone heads in perfectly straight lines deep underground. To this day, no one knows why they held a funeral for their own stone monuments. This next empire was hiding so high up in the clouds, you'd need wings to find it easily. 4. Ciudad Perdida. Let's talk about the literal lost city that was completely swallowed by the high-altitude canopy of South America. Hidden deep within the steep, treacherous slopes of the Sierra Nevada de Santa Marta Mountains in modern-day Colombia, this city was built by the Tairona people. The disaster that wiped them out was a horrific combination of total geographic isolation meeting an invisible, unstoppable wave of foreign pathogens introduced during the Spanish conquest. Though the invaders never actually reached the city, their deadly diseases traveled up the mountain trails, silently wiping out the population. Picture a giant, twisting spiral staircase inside a massive modern shopping mall, but carved entirely out of mountain dirt and stone. That is the size and shape of Ciudad Perdida. It consists of over 160 massive, circular stone terraces carved directly into the near-vertical mountainside. The stones are slick with bright green moss, and thick, white mountain fog constantly rolls through the dense palm trees, giving it a ghostly, floating appearance. The real power is their mastery of vertical urban planning. They built an intricate network of stone paths, suspended bridges, and gravity-fed drainage systems that completely prevented the massive mountain from washing away during torrential tropical storms. Their sheer engineering endurance in a nearly vertical environment is a logistical superpower. For a modern person, catching a bug might just feel like a bad flu that keeps you on the couch for a few days. But for the isolated Tairona people, encountering foreign diseases was a completely terrifying, apocalyptic event. With zero natural immunity, a simple cold or pox acted like an invisible forest fire, burning through the densely packed mountain terraces. This is exactly how an invisible plague inflicts its damage. The disease stalks the population, traveling silently on the breath and hands of fleeing refugees seeking safety in the high city. The virus attacks the body, causing raging fevers and weakness, making it completely impossible for the farmers to climb the steep mountain stairs to tend their crops. Once the food supply halts, hunger violently ambushes the weakened survivors. The jungle then waits patiently, quickly sending thick vines and roots over the stone paths the moment human foot traffic stops. Here is the bizarre behavior that makes the story so wild. When the city was finally rediscovered in the 1970s, it wasn't found by scientists or archaeologists. It was found by local treasure looters who were hunting for rare bird feathers. They literally slipped in the mud, fell down a ravine, and landed directly on an ancient stone staircase covered in gold artifacts. But while the Tairona were wiped out by foreign invaders, the next civilization caused their own localized climate disaster. 5. El Mirador. Let's talk about an empire that literally burned down its own ecosystem to fuel its obsession with architectural beauty. Located in the northern absolute depths of the Petén jungle in Guatemala, this pre-classic Maya city was a towering giant of the ancient world. But their society was wiped out by a massive, self-inflicted ecological disaster. They aggressively deforested their surrounding environment to produce white lime plaster, creating severe soil erosion and localized climate change that turned their fertile basin into an uninhabitable swamp. To grasp the sheer, unbelievable size of this place, imagine a modern mega-shopping mall, complete with its massive parking lots. That is the footprint of La Danta, the largest pyramid in El Mirador, and one of the largest pyramids by volume in the entire world. Visually, today it looks like a massive, natural mountain covered in thick, dark green jungle, but beneath the dirt is solid, meticulously laid white limestone. Surprisingly, the power is their absolute obsession with brilliant white plaster. They possessed an incredible industrial acceleration, burning millions of tons of green wood to heat limestone to extreme temperatures. This process allowed them to coat their entire massive city in a thick, smooth layer of glowing white stucco that could be seen for miles. For you and me, burning too much wood might just mean a smoky campfire that makes your eyes water. But for the citizens of El Mirador, overharvesting would cause a catastrophic environmental collapse. By cutting down every single tree for miles to fuel their plaster fires, they completely destroyed the root systems that held the earth together. Here is how extreme deforestation and erosion attack a landscape. Without the tree canopy, the brutal tropical sun directly bakes the soil, while torrential rains furiously wash the loose dirt away. The mud literally chases the water down into the surrounding swamps, choking the vital wetlands with thick, gray clay. This completely suffocates their intricate agricultural terraces. The damaged earth strikes back, making it totally impossible to grow corn. The humans are forced to endure horrific starvation as the barren, stripped landscape violently rejects their massive population. The most bizarre, completely unexpected fact is the sheer mathematical scale of their mistake. To create just 1 single ton of their precious white plaster, they had to burn approximately 5 tons of fresh, green jungle wood. They were literally tearing down the forest that fed them just to make their driveways and pyramids look prettier, triggering a man-made drought thousands of years before the Industrial Revolution. While El Mirador starved its own soil, the next ancient empire simply watched its only water source vanish into thin air. 6. Mohenjo-Daro. Let's talk about a hyper-advanced, peaceful metropolis that became a silent ghost town when the earth itself shifted beneath it. Located in the arid, dusty plains of the Indus Valley in modern-day Pakistan, this city was a crown jewel of the ancient world. The disaster that wiped them out was a catastrophic geological and climatic shift. Shifting tectonic plates deep underground actually forced the massive Sarasvati and Indus rivers to alter their courses, effectively shutting off the city's water supply and turning a fertile valley into a scorching desert. If you look at the layout of this ancient city, you have to picture the highly organized, perfectly straight street grid of modern-day Manhattan. The city was completely constructed from identical, standard-sized baked red bricks. The appearance is stunningly modern. Endless rows of tan and red brick houses, straight alleyways, and deep, circular brick wells dotting the dry, dusty landscape. The real power is their absolute mastery of hypersanitation and indoor plumbing. Over 4,000 years ago, nearly every single home in this massive city had a private, flushable toilet and a dedicated bathing room. Their speed in developing complex, covered urban sewer systems was an engineering superpower that Europe wouldn't match for thousands of years. For a modern human, a plumbing issue usually just means the water pressure drops in your morning shower. But for Mohenjo-Daro, the loss of water was an agonizing, slow-motion apocalypse. When the tectonic plates shifted and the mighty rivers slowly moved miles away, the entire city was left to bake in the relentless, punishing desert sun. Here is how a vanishing river physically attacks an urban population. The drying earth cracks and turns to fine dust, which the wind violently whips through the perfectly straight city streets. The lack of flowing water attacks the very core of their superpower, their sanitation. Without water to flush the intricate sewers, disease quickly ambushes the remaining population. The crops wither, and the trade boats that brought wealth are left stranded in dry, cracking mud. The humans endure months of searing heat and thirst before finally surrendering and walking away forever. The final fact that completely turns everything upside down is that they left behind 0 weapons. In a time when other empires were endlessly slaughtering each other with bronze swords, archaeologists have never found any evidence of warfare, conquering armies, or even a king's palace in Mohenjo-Daro. Furthermore, they left behind thousands of beautifully carved seals with a written language that, to this day, modern science still cannot read, making them a completely silent mystery. Leaving the desert behind, the next empire built walls so thick they completely baffled European explorers. 7. Great Zimbabwe. Let's talk about a towering stone fortress of wealth that slowly collapsed under the sheer, crushing weight of its own success. Located in the rolling, grassy plateaus of sub-Saharan Africa in modern-day Zimbabwe, this massive city controlled a vast network of gold trade. However, the catastrophic disaster that emptied the city was extreme resource depletion and overgrazing. The society grew so rich and heavily populated that their massive herds of cattle completely stripped the fragile landscape of vegetation, leading to total ecological exhaustion and starvation. If you want to understand the scale of these walls, picture a standard 3-story suburban house. That is exactly how tall the massive, curved granite walls of the great enclosure stand. The visual texture is incredible, millions of rectangular, gray granite blocks perfectly stacked on top of one another, forming massive, sweeping curves and towering conical shapes that blend seamlessly into the surrounding rocky hills. The real power is their flawless, dry stone architectural engineering. They built these towering, massive structures entirely without a single drop of mortar or cement to hold the bricks together. Their endurance and precision in shaping millions of rocks so they fit together perfectly by gravity alone is an absolute superpower of physics. For us, overgrazing a piece of land might just look like a patch of lawn turning brown and patchy in the late summer heat. But for Great Zimbabwe, it triggered a massive, irreversible ecological death spiral. When thousands of cattle ate every single blade of grass and trampled the topsoil, the land lost its ability to hold rainwater, turning the fertile plateau into a barren, dusty wasteland. Here is exactly how overfarming and overgrazing inflict fatal damage on an empire. The massive herds of cattle act like a slow-moving plague, aggressively tearing the grass out by its roots. When the heavy rains finally come, there are no roots left to hold the dirt, so the water violently attacks the ground, washing the rich topsoil away into the rivers. Hunger then waits patiently outside the magnificent stone walls. As the soil dies, the massive population of farmers and royals alike are starved of their basic calories, forcing them to abandon their impenetrable stone fortress. Here is the bizarre behavior regarding those massive, towering walls. When European explorers first saw them, they assumed they were built for brutal military defense. But modern acoustics have turned that upside down. The walls were actually designed as massive, curved sound amplifiers. A ruler could stand inside the enclosure and speak in a normal voice, and the curved stones would catch and amplify the sound, broadcasting their voice across the entire valley to the commoners below. Our final stop takes us to North America, to a massive city that rivaled London but vanished without a trace. 8. Cahokia. Let's talk about a sprawling metropolis of towering dirt pyramids that was ultimately washed away by changing climates and endless rain. Located in the fertile Mississippi River Valley in modern-day Illinois, Cahokia was the largest pre-Columbian city north of Mexico. But their society was completely derailed by a devastating combination of massive, catastrophic flooding and the onset of the Little Ice Age. Violent, unpredictable rainstorms caused the mighty rivers to overflow, repeatedly drowning their crops and unraveling their complex political system. To truly understand the massive scale of this place, you must compare it to the Great Pyramid of Giza. Monk's Mound, the central structure of Cahokia, actually has a base that is physically larger than the massive Egyptian pyramid. It is a towering, stepped mountain made entirely of dark brown earth, covered today in bright green grass, rising nearly 100 feet into the Midwestern sky. Surprisingly, the power is their ability to literally move mountains of earth by the basketful. They possessed the sheer organizational acceleration to move over 50 million cubic feet of heavy, wet dirt using nothing but woven baskets and human backs. The sheer physical endurance required to construct these massive mounds without beasts of burden is staggering. For a modern viewer, heavy spring rain might just mean overflowing a puddle in your driveway or having to cancel a picnic. But for the citizens of Cahokia, relentless heavy rains triggered catastrophic, unstoppable flooding. The swollen Mississippi River became a violent, muddy monster that repeatedly wiped out their critical maize crops and physically washed away their wooden homes. This is how extreme flooding relentlessly attacks a vulnerable river city. The dark, muddy water rises silently at first, then violently breaches the riverbanks, rushing rapidly toward the city center. The floodwaters attack the base of their massive wooden defensive palisades, rotting the thick logs and causing the walls to collapse. The standing water suffocates the agricultural fields under thick, heavy mud, completely destroying the food supply. The cold, wet environment breeds disease, forcing the desperate, starving humans to eventually fracture, abandon their sacred mounds, and scatter into the wilderness. Here is the bizarre, unexpected behavior that controlled their entire society. The people of Cahokia were absolutely obsessed with a brutal, fast-paced sport called chunky. They would roll a highly polished stone disc across a packed dirt courtyard and throw massive, deadly spears at where they thought the stone would stop. This game wasn't just for fun, it was deeply tied to their religion, and the outcomes were so important that they literally dictated political power and resolved massive disputes among the tens of thousands of citizens.